2, 3, 4. And I have this, and I do this. Oops. Nope, I don't. I don't do this. 1, 2, 3, 4 else for twice operation. Not.
Rory's screen share is not coming through.
Yeah, David.
It is now.
David, I see 3 decks of slides in the tracker. And no, I see 4 decks of slides in the tracker and 3 decks in MeTecho. So we appear to be missing one in MeTecho.
There's a refresh button at the top, and that one shows 4 for me after I push to refresh.
So do you, Wes or David, do you see the slides for NAT, SCTP NAT 3.1?
Yes.
I do see them also.
I do, after pressing the refresh button.
Yeah, they're there.
Okay.
On the other hand, MeTecho is just showing me a new deck is being shared, so I'm not getting anything out of that. Hang on, let's see if that's working now. No, I still have problems. Let me go take out my corporate firewall, see if that improves things.
So this will be TSVWG. We'll wait just a couple of minutes for people to enter the room. As in other sessions, we'll be taking the queue via MeTecho. So if you want to speak, please join the queue in MeTecho, and we'll try and coordinate with remote participants as well as people in the room and take you in line. When you are here and you wish to speak at the mic, when it comes your turn, just go ahead and speak at the mic. We currently have 3 of our 4 decks of slides loaded into MeTecho, and we will start in just 2 minutes' time. We'll need a note taker, as usual. So we'd love to have a volunteer of a note taker. Right, I guess we'll start. This is TSVWG. Welcome to Vienna. Welcome if you're a remote participant. Welcome if you're a local participant. The three chairs of TSVWG are myself, Gori Fairhurst, Wes Eddy, who's remote, and David Black, who's also remote. So this meeting, like all of the meetings that the IETF holds, is covered by the IETF Notewell. If you haven't seen this, please read it. If you have seen it, please look at it again. If you have any queries about IPR and what to discuss in front of other people, our policy is quite simple and quite clear. Please just stick to the policy. We need help in TSVWG with various things. And of course, to start a TSVWG meeting, we need help with a note taker. At this point, we pause and we wait for somebody to volunteer as a note taker. Sure it will. Okay, this gets an honourable point, and we shall work harder to find someone else next time, but thank you ever so much, Stuart. Stuart Cheshire will take some notes, and we will publish those at the end of the meeting. If you're going to submit future work to this working group, it's helpful to tell the chairs in advance. It's helpful to write an internet draft, probably essential if you wish to present, and please add TSVWG somewhere in the draft name so that we can flag it in the ID tracker. We're using the MeetEcho mic queue, so this is your instructions for using MeetEcho. If you haven't used it, simply press the hand button and we will see you in the queue here. Don't use the mic icon if you're actually in this room. If you're using the QR code to log in and take the blue sheets, then you won't have a mic button on your app. And that's a note that we do need people to use the QR code so that we can take the blue sheet record of who's in attendance. So if you haven't scanned the QR code, please do. We have a number of documents that we're progressing through the working group, and as ever, document quality relies on reviews. So if you'd like the documents that you care about to be reviewed, please put in effort to review other documents. Review comments can be anything from people helping to improve particular text to people raising up issues to be discussed. A lack of reviews probably indicates a lack of care that the document is finally published, so please do review. And if you're wanting something new to look at that's coming up towards a working group last call, there's the UDP options and DSCP considerations work, which are two things which probably could do with reviews soon. So our achievements and accomplishments are we have published no RFC since IETF113, which is called Be Kind to Our Area Director period. We have a number queued up to go to our area director, and we have one ID still at the RFC editor, which has been through review and will be published shortly, which is 4960 bis. Five IDs are with working group chairs and authors, indicating to our ADs that things are heading their way soon. ECNN CAPS still has some text to be refined, and then we'll receive a Shepherd write-up and be sent for publication. We don't anticipate a need for further working group input here, but we will send the changes proposed to the list so you can confirm that the document in its final state is ready for progression. ECN for tunnels that use shim headers has already been through this process, but is paired with the above draft. Then we have the three L4S IDs, which Wes might want to say a few words to, if you're online, Wes.
Sure. So these are all post-working group last call at the moment. We've solicited on the mailing list for everyone who had commented and was expecting some changes to make sure that the changes match their expectations. And we discussed at the interim meeting prior the solicitation of inputs on the Shepherd write-ups, and I have a huge number of responses on those, which I've been working through. And I think there are only a couple of small points left to be taken care of still. So I think they're very close to being complete, and I plan to wrap those up with the people I've been corresponding with on this week and get these to the area director in a week or so.
So thank you, and if you have any questions about these particular drafts, please send them to the chairs. Wes will be shepherding the process as they proceed towards publication. And we have a number of remaining working group IDs. We have the L4S Ops guidance, which we'll be talking about, NQB, which we'll also be discussing, UDP options, and DPLP MTUD for UDP options. 3 and 4 will be taken on Friday. DTLS and SCTP, and SCTP NAT will be taken today. Signing a new recommended DSCP and how you might go about this and what might be the hurdles to getting a good DSCP will be discussed on Friday, and multipath DCCP will also be discussed on Friday. We did a milestone review, and when we did these slides, we had 3 milestones which were for May 2022 and September 2022, and milestones which were being revised for MP, DCCP, DTLS, and the DSCP considerations. I think they're either approved or they're in the process of being approved, so they will appear in the tracker if you look. Various other milestones were reviewed. We've decided as working group chairs we're going to try and keep our milestones up to date. Working groups have to decide what they're going to do with milestones, whether they think they're superfluous or whether they think they're helpful. We've decided that they're useful targets, and therefore we're going to try and refresh them and keep them sensible and try and hope, or try our best to facilitate getting the documents published before the milestone is due. So the milestone is the date at which we expect this work to conclude. Beforehand is always good. We have a number of liaisons and announcements. I'm not aware of any new liaison updates. David, do you have anything to say on the liaisons?
The WPA liaison was responded to about a year ago. we basically said, try not to use quite so many DSCPs and suggest that WBA and 3GPP get coordinated on this. Nothing has been heard since. I think we can take this off future agendas.
Okay, and similarly, the liaison requests on DTLS was encouragement to produce the document, to submit it to publication so that E3GPP could reference it, and the GSMA liaison related to multipath DCCP and their expectations for that, which we discussed previously. So nothing new here. There is a request for doing proposed work on a new CCID. I'm bringing this up here just from the point of view of coordination. This relates to the datagram congestion control protocol. It's a proposal to add a CCID relating to BBR. And at the moment, BBR is an item of discussion as an algorithm in ICCRG. So there is nothing that the transport working group here will do until that algorithm has been approved for progression in the IETF. And when it has, we can come and determine whether a CCID is appropriate, useful, and interesting for us to progress. So if you're interested in this space, go read the draft, help facilitate the work, and encourage the publication of a BBR spec, and we will move forward.
In addition, I want to mention that the HPCC++ draft has an agenda slot in RTG WG routing working group next hour. Yeah, it's got some relationship to routing, but it probably belongs over in transport, and I think the suggestion is that ICCRG ought to have a look at this. In general, it'd be good to think about what the transport area ought to be doing in the way of data center congestion control.
Thanks, David. As ever, data center and internet are not that far apart, and we have to understand how to do congestion control in both. So that's a good comment. Keep your eyes on that. And we have our agenda. The agenda, as what's currently put up, looks like this. If you're aware of it, today is Monday, and we have 3 topics for discussion today relating to SCTP and also the L4S Ops draft. And we'll take comments on the agenda if we have any. If you wish to suggest amendments or corrections, please do. I'll also show the agenda for the Friday meeting. The second slot for TSVWG will be on Friday. Session 2 will look at these topics. We don't currently have any other business scheduled. We do expect some discussion of the ATSS work in 3GPP, which is a work item, in the side meeting, probably following the Friday session. I will send an announcement to the list with details about how to participate if you're interested. Any other agenda items or anything else that you feel you wish to mention on the chair's slides? Then we'll move to the first of our topics for today. Maybe the only agenda bashing will be if when I go to the MeetEcho I don't find slides for Michael's item 3.1. We'll take Michael at the end of the session rather than at the beginning, because that will give us time to work out how we're going to get slides to you. Aha, we have Michael's slides here by magic. So Michael, you will be on first to talk about SCTP NAT. So this is an item which we're encouraging discussion on to figure out what the working group should do with an ID that's been around for probably one of the longest on our list, and it's one that we need to determine what the next steps are. So Michael, go ahead and talk, and at the end we'll ask what those next steps should be. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is about a draft which has been around for a long, long time. We had a working group last call. We got, there was a transition of the transport AD, so we got 2 reviews from Magnus and Martin. And right now we have an alternate proposal from Ericsson, which I provided a link to. Go to the next slide. So to give a very high level view why we are talking about SCTP and NAT, it basically comes down that an SCTP endpoint can have multiple IP addresses, but only a single port number. So the port number concept is shared between UDP, TCP, DCCP, UDP Lite, and SCTP, but when it comes to this multi-homing thing, it's only a single port number. And that has the consequence that if you have multiple paths towards your peer, if you want to change the port number, it has to be done consistently on all the paths. So assuming that the middle boxes are not communicating to each other, this means you can't translate the port number. And this has then, as a consequence, what are you doing if you have local port number collisions? So if you have 2 endpoints, local endpoints inside the private networks, which want to talk to the same peer, and they choose the same port number. UDP or TCP based NAT would just remap the port number, and that's fine, and you can't do this for SCTP. So this is why to address this problem, a long time ago, we figured out that you can use the port numbers in the verification tag, which is a SCTP-specific field, like a connection identifier, and then you can handle these local port number collisions. So that's why we thought it's a good, or the authors thought it's a good idea to specify something SCTP specific. Next slide. So this is basically a summary of the comments we got from the ADs. I haven't marked which ADs, as some of the comments were given by both ADs and some only by one, but it doesn't matter. We should address them all, or try to. So the first one is that IP fragmentation handling at the NAT was an issue, but I think we can deal with that like using the same terminology as done for UDP or TCP. So that's not very hard. The question was how to control the NAT-friendly behavior, which is endpoints have to behave in a specific way when they are dealing with this NAT scenario. And the idea was just if one of the local addresses is a private one, you do this, or you have a socket option. That's laid out. We can make that clearer. That's not that complicated. Improved multi-homing support was asked for. This means we can have even more examples showing that. It was asked for that the NAT support multiple external addresses. So we were focusing on the simple case that only one external address is available. But this actually means you have to have another field in the NAT binding table. Then the remote address was taken out of the NAT binding table based on a research paper from Australia. And that simplified a lot, but the question was, please bring it back, at least if we are not using this advanced version, the SCTP specific version of NAT. It was asked if the processing of HTTP packets can be simplified so that the NAT function does not have to parse the packets and behave differently based on the chunk type, when to add the state, and whether a NAT function should send packets at all. Because right now the document, according to the document, the NAT function will send packets. And the last one is the notion of HTTP associations has to be changed because you must support multiple associations with the same port numbers, and that means you have to distinguish them between. You have to distinguish them using the verification tag. The issues here are ordered in a specific way. The more easily to address one are on the top, the more substantial ones are on the bottom. So if you go to the next slide, I have listed possible ways forward. The first one is to stick with this method we are currently proposing. Adding the entries to the NAT table will add complexity, which is, I mean, this is already not trivial, so it adds complexity. But we can address issue 225. The NAT, the fragmentation stuff is just wording. I mean, you can't do anything more. We do have always the possibility that the endpoints do not support this additional mode, so there's a fallback mechanism. And basically, just using the fallback mechanism, taking out all the HTTP specific things, is a possibility which would address issue 227. So that would mean don't use the verification tag, don't disable restart, add the external remote addresses to the NAT binding table. And basically this comes down to a NAT function which is not HTTP aware. It's just outgoing packets, establish a relation, you don't change port numbers, and that's it. The drawback is that in case of local port number collisions, you can't do anything, so the association can't be established. So that's the, well, I would say this, especially if this does not change the definition of the association in the endpoints. So this seems to be addressing most of the issues. The third alternative is to drop this document at all and go with the Ericsson proposal. Or the fourth way is to drop the work at all and say, if we come up with a document which describes an almost HTTP unaware NAT, we don't have to do the work here. These are the four options I see. And I think it's the last slide, right, Gori?
It is the last slide, and the fifth option is propose something else, but do it now. So,
okay, yeah, I mean, yeah.
And my default option could be 4 or could be 1 or 2. I mean, literally, we need people to come to the mic and say whether 1 or 2 is acceptable as a way forward. We've been working as a working group on this for a while. If anyone who's commented or anyone who has new insight wishes to comment on whether 1 or 2 is acceptable, I guess if you don't care, then my job's really easy. We've had a lot of review, it's been around for a lot of time, we can go ahead, but if you care to take up options 1 or 2, can you offer some comment about this, or agree to offer some comment on the list?
On the chat, Colin asked if there are people having large-scale nets. I'm not aware of that. What I am aware of is an implementation done by the Australian University for FreeBSD, and based on that, they did experiments and measurements on scalability. They suggested to take out the remote address from the NAT binding table.
Yeah, that was the remote address discussion.
Okay,
Claudio, would you like to say something?
I mean, actually,
You need to speak up a little bit. We can't hear you from
I'm
here.
sorry, it is doesn't work like it always doesn't happen. I mean, the point here is the reason why I was trying to make some work here is that rather than big scaling that may exist or may not exist yet, there is a problem, and the problem is that what we are instantiating today in the cloud, so being instantiated in different namespaces and in different virtual machines here, is network nodes that have SCTP connectivity. So if this was not existing before, now the problem is actual. And I think that, and since the networking, the primary networking in cloud is provided via NAT, then we need to have a way forward. Being one of the ones listed here, or maybe a brand new idea, but it is a problem that is just popping up.
Could I check if people in the room heard the comment? It was very difficult on the stage to hear. Claudio,
Can you
didn't actually hear you.
up? We could see you, we could hear you, but it's very even soft is not the right thing. Could it be that the wrong mic is used?
Let me try a different. Okay,
if you're using your headset microphone, moving the boom closer to your mouth will probably help.
Can you hear me better now?
No, it is still the same. It is muffled.
Hello?
So
right.
moving your microphone on your headset closer to your mouth will
Can you hear me now?
Not really, no.
It is still the same.
Hello? I think I have problems.
That seems to be an improvement.
Now it's better.
Better.
Try again and speak up.
Yeah, if you talk loudly, we can hear you.
Hello?
But we missed the last comment, I'm afraid.
Okay, you're coming through now. Please repeat what you were saying.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hear me now?
Go ahead.
Okay. I can't hear you. That's the problem. That's very I can come back.
So your microphone is now working.
Sorry.
Your microphone is now working, and now you just need you to be able to hear us.
Okay,
I think one of the comments he tried to make is that the use case they have in mind is something cloud-based stuff.
Sure.
And the document, the original intention for the document was not focusing on that. So
yeah, I mean, Michael, my comment still is, can people live with the option 1 presented here, and can they live with option 2? The change of scenario, yeah, was understood in the working group last call, and it would be good to address more cases if it's possible. And we need to decide on whether 1 or 2 are acceptable. I see Martin in the line, and I'd like to hear from Martin. I'd also, we'll come back to Claudio afterwards. And if we can't get an audio connection, we can follow this up on a one-to-one basis. That would be easy. So go ahead, Martin.
Yes, Martin Duke, Google. So with AD hat on, I don't have a strong opinion here as long as we have, good consensus in the group. as an individual, I'd like to ask Michael, as the editor, if he has a preferred alternative of these four, what his technical opinion is.
Well, my opinion is solution 2 addresses more issues. So it's more work than solution 1, but the issues brought up, I mean, I can't argue them. And so solution 2 addresses more of them. If it makes people happy in a cloud environment, we have to see. At least you don't have to change the endpoints. You have the risk of higher local port number collisions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Claudio, do you want to have one last say, or have you decided we'll follow up off the list? Go ahead if you can.
Either I can speak or I can listen to. So it is very hard for me. What I say is that we are running a prototype on option 3 and see what is possible to do with that. It's not ready yet, but hopefully it will be ready soon, and I will share the result. The idea is that we will work on the NAT support for Linux, and then possibly do some implementation based on user space SCTP from BSD. All of this will be done in the open source.
Thank you. And we'll follow up on the list as well, of course. Magnus, please.
Yeah, Magnus Westland. My understanding of this problematic is that we have 3 hexes. We have one which is, can we really support multi-homing well? The other axis is how many concurrent sessions can we support? And that's the third is then the output, so to say, is how complex the solution is. So you can support multi-homing, but very few sessions with relatively low complexity. Or you can go, and I think it's a question of, are we fine with maybe supporting multi-homing, and how about supporting few sessions? And that might actually be sufficient for the cloud deployment cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll take Cullen Jennings.
So Cullen Jennings, one, I mean, the issues in 1 seem sort of broken, and I don't see how to solve them in any way. But talking about, so I'm not in favor of that. But 2, also, my understanding of that, and I could be confused, I don't really see how that isn't true. Like anytime you just use the IP address and have one-to-one mappings, you have problems that anybody can just scan through all the ports, and now your NAT is totally DDoS. Like it's totally trivial to DDoS anything with that type of scenario. So I don't actually really see how 2 works. I think that as you dig into that, you know, there's no way to really tell whether there was a conflict. You have to somehow drop the packets that have a conflict. Otherwise, you have two different things trying to use the same port. I mean, I've seen many people, not in SCTP, but I've seen this tried in UDP multiple times, and I've never seen it work. And I can't imagine why all the UDP problems with that type of solution don't exactly map over to SCTP as well. So I'm having a really hard time understanding how 2 is a viable option.
Okay.
Maybe one point. So right now, the idea is that state can be added only by internal hosts. And if there is a port number collision, the NetBox sends a packet back indicating that. So a node in the private network can do a DDoS by establishing a lot of state. Yes, that's true. If that is not a DDoS, but by chance, and the local endpoint is not relying on that particular port, it can it gets a notification from the middle box that this port is taken, and it can choose a different one and reconnect. But a local node can do a DDoS, yes.
Thank you. Right, we're going to have to decide one of these ways forward, and we're going to have to decide shortly after this meeting. There is obviously time to discuss on list and obviously time to get people together to find their opinions, but we do have to make a decision because The working group's had the document for a long time. So I'd encourage people to try and follow up on what they've just said at the mic or what they think on the list. If you're in any doubt, please forward to the chairs and we will try and help to understand the positions, and then we will call out a possible way forward for the working group. Thank you for the talk. We'll take the next presentation. It was you. And we have, oh, I have to press share. Okay, so Magnus on DTLS over SCTP. Go ahead, Magnus.
Yes, so let's see, just trying to eat the mic here. So I'm Magnus Westlund. My co-author is Claudio Porfiri and Jan Mattsson. Next slide. So we've been working on this draft, and I mean the high point is here. We're trying to address the user message limit of DTLS SCTP per RFC 6083. We have this communication with 3DPP, etc. They have a problem in several of their RAM protocols. Since last meeting, we have received some feedback from Lian. We also had contracted out an implementation of the specification. We got some feedback. We have implemented some of this so far, and it continues. And I have to remind you that there's 2 IPR declarations from Ericsson on this document. Next slide. So this update for towards this meeting was fairly significant, not in solution space, but overall saying a lot of details, clarifications, etc. about solving issues. We clarified about the theoretical message length limitations, and we're saying that basically up to 2.2 to the power 64 minus 1 byte is I mean, we want to really limit the support of, or say the need for supporting pointers, etc. But that's the potential for a message size, which I think is reasonable. We also look into some of these SCTP API limitations might limit the sender further, but shouldn't be an issue for a receiver. So a sender that knows he can deal with, or ensure that you have a stack that matches that. We also looked into stream usage update. This is minor in some sense, but actually the main point here is DTLS SCTP before DTLS process the message doesn't know what's incoming, if that's user data or a DTLS message. And that has some impact anyway of how you can send this. So we thought we were be able to really relax the limitation of how it's sending, and it's up to the sender, so to say, to send on whatever stream they want to, because it anyway doesn't matter until the DTLS stack process the message. We also looked into shutdown procedures, clarifying those. We have a new section on SCTP API considerations, trying to note what's kind of special functionality you might need on the SCTP stack to support this well, and a number of clarifications on various things. So it's a fairly large update if you looked at the draft and the diff. So next slide. So I want to remind you about what we're really addressing in this draft compared to RFC 6083. So it's the message length. We also have the SCTP association handshake now negotiates the support of DTLS over SCTP. We're trying to minimize the impact on ULP protocol, basically having so if what you can support in SCTP, we can basically support over DTLS SCTP also. And it's slightly wider than what 683, or as the number of features is that's slightly easier to use, or as no limits. Addressing this, I want to note, that 683, per its original publication, was using DTLS 1.0, had less limitation than what it has now, since RFC 8996 forced DTLS upgrade to 1.2. Because, for example, to support a long-lived SCTP association, DTLS 1.2 has a renegotiation security issues, which has to do with there's some challenges there of implementing security. There have been some attacks, etc. So people has a tendency to turn it off, so it's availability prospect and some challenging implementations. It also limits the number of renegotiations to 65K. And for DTLS 1.3, there's no renegotiation longer with mutual authentication. The only thing you can do is a key update on, and that doesn't update the masked secret, which means that you don't rekey STP auth either. So your session length is now much more limited due to, basically when you're running out of STP auth key usages, you have to terminate the session and restart. And you will not have any forward secrecy during that, any updates you do for DTLS 1.3. So that's basically some of these challenges here. And then we also have the STP auth. I mean, HMAC SHA-1 is aging. You probably want something newer for the future. So, but yeah. So let's go on. So there have been some discussion on the mailing list, but from my perspective, I think there's two realistic ways forward. Obsoleting RFC 6083 when publishing draft as RFC, which would have been the default. Publishing as an alternative RFC to 6083 without obsoleting is another. And that would allow people to update 6083 and if etc. if they want to do something, try to do something there which doesn't infringe the IPR. Or see what it can do. So, I mean, 6083 has limited applicability and has its security issues, so I think something maybe needs to be done anyway, but it's, so, yeah, I think we can go into some discussion. I think Michael had a slightly different view of this, so.
I'd like to take discussion on this slide if we can.
Yeah.
And as a chair, I can say that we would be okay if the working group decides to not obsolete 6083 using this draft. We can make that decision later if we wish to as a working group, so it is a possibility. So what do people think about the options and what do people want to say in response to this particular proposal for a way forward? Anybody got any questions or comments?
Michael?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'm clicking. I answer to the mailing list. So from a technical point of view, I think RFC 6083 needs to be updated. I'm not arguing on any technical things right now. My point is that, in my view, DTLS for SCTP is something like TLS for TCP or DTLS for UDP. So replacing an RFC which you can implement in open source and which you can use by a document proposed by a company enforcing its own IPR seems to me suboptimal. I mean, up to now we have everything we did in SCTP was backed up by open source, and at least when it came to working group last call, we had some implementations, and this is not possible here. So that's why I'm not arguing technically, but the IPR stuff held by the company working on this document is something which I'm not in favor of.
No, understood. From my perspective, I just want to ensure that I would say that we then, in that case, if you're willing to maybe potentially drive some alternatives here, I would go with then B, or at least towards B for the no, so we don't get stuck in a situation where no progress at all is made. Because, I mean, we're doing this work to ensure that 3GPP has a reference for something that needs to resolve. And ending up where we have no progress, yeah, and just spend a lot of time working on it, that's not productive at all. So I wanted some direction at least that enables us or 3GPP to make progress here in the end. And I noticed that you, Michael, did suggest that this should be taken to 3GPP, but that also doesn't feel particularly well either. So.
I see, but I mean, if we now decide that this goes as an alternative, and it's not updating RC 6083, I think 6083 needs an update. So this would mean bringing up another document at the IETF, which doubles the load. And I mean, and the other point is, why should anyone? I mean, normally things are brought to the IETF to work on it in a community, which improves the document quality. And for me, a company coming to the IETF wanting to enforce its IPR in a document just means if I'm working for a competitor, I would just shut up and don't say anything. Hope that there are issues in the document, and once the document has been published, file IPRs, or even before that, file IPRs on fixing this. So, but I mean, just leaving two documents in parallel there and not saying anything is also not. I mean, this helps 3GPP, but
yeah. But so, I mean, my question to you, Michael, are you willing to try to do something about finding an alternative here? Because, I mean, if no one is either doing an alternative, then we're at like some type of impasse, and it doesn't make any progress either. So,
I would be willing I would be willing to work on an update on 6083. That's why I started to be a co-author of your document. But and if people are interested in it, I'm happy to do so. But if no one else is interested, then it's done. Go ahead, do whatever you want.
I think I can comment at this point. So I will, of course, offer the opportunity for AD to comment if he wishes. But my understanding of what we've talked about here is that the working group could decide not to update 6083 by obsoleting it. So we continue this work is a proposal that's on the table. That inevitably might mean that two further things could happen. Another ID could emerge which updates 6083, or by the time that this work we're considering has reached fruition, we decide that 6083 should finally be obsoleted anyway because the IPR issues have been either gone away or have been countered or are well known, whatever the outcome. So there is a way to proceed here, which means that we continue the work item without doing the update, with the penalty that we may have to publish another RFC either to obsolete 6083 or to update it as a parallel spec. And I'm asking the working group, and will do via the mailing list, whether that is an acceptable way forward. Does my AD wish to say anything at this point about creating two parallel specs, or does he want to wait and see what the working group says?
I will confess to not having, again, a terribly strong opinion here. It is a problem if we're in a situation where, the BSD implementation, which I think is a relatively important one, cannot follow the spec. So I'm initially like fairly sympathetic to the way you described the story, that maybe starting with B. I mean, I don't hear anyone stepping up really to write the open source IPR free version of this. So if we want to keep, so it sounds to me like unless the IPR rights are loose enough to allow this kind of work, it seems to me the outcome will be that you have 6083 still functional, and then a alternative to 6080, alternative improvement to 6083 that will be used by some implementations, and I don't maybe necessarily understand exactly what the interoperability implications of that are, and if Magnus can answer that would be interesting. But it seems inevitably we're driving in that direction.
Yeah, and we may have to update 6083 anyway for security reasons because the security part of the spec changes. So security algorithms will be obsoleted. So that may have to be maintained as a separate document if we decide to go along that path. But I guess we acknowledge this by going along this path now.
And given that 3GPP needs this, I don't think like doing nothing doesn't strike me as a alternative either. So I don't know, Magnus, can you speak at all to the interoperability issues of a 6083 and this?
So I mean,
together?
The current draft of the new proposal is very clear on when you're negotiating the handshake using the this defined method for detecting it. The 6083, you have no clear indicator that you're going to do 6083 unless you see it's SCTP off and then there's a detailless handshake. That's how you detect that it's happening. And this other one, you're doing the handshake, in the association handshake, you will detect, okay, I want to do this. So you know that this is, and a future proposal could do the same, but with a different identifier, so you could negotiate which you are doing. So I think there's, at least parallel existence is not an issue.
Okay, excellent. So then, if I understand correctly, if you had a 6083 endpoint, well, actually, okay, so let me back up. So with your draft, if you had an endpoint supporting your draft, and it tried, they would not see this option from the peer, and so it would recognize what was going on. With a 6083 endpoint, it will see DTLS payloads, and think that it is doing 6083 when it's actually doing what your draft is doing.
No, because so there's actually defined how you fall back to 6083 behavior from our specified behavior, okay. And it's you're never going to end up there unless you have a policy for willingly allowing it, because otherwise it would be security risk. So okay, you will, yeah.
All right. I mean, it sounds like you've got an approach, and we can wordsmith it, but that's good. Yeah, I mean, I think ideally there would be some sort of minimal update to 6083. Again, it doesn't strike me as there being an enormous amount of energy to do so. So it would be nice to be in a place where we can live without one.
Right. I think that's a fair thing, and if that emerges in the future, that can be always can do maintenance of aspects. So this is okay as well.
Okay.
Fine.
Thanks.
This proposal will be taken to the list, and I'd happily work with the people who've spoken here just to make sure that the right proposal words are written on when we send it to the mailing list.
Yeah, okay. How are we doing on time?
We're a bit short.
Yeah, let's skip this then. So and
there are additional slides, shall we say?
Yeah, there was the in-time permits to discuss an issue, but it's actually, so yeah, I think people can read those. I will post to the mailing list about the issues or anything when we work with it. So we have a few smaller, or there's one thing with the first of those is around DTLS 1.2 is a bit annoying, but I think we probably have some way forward. We'll have to figure something out, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Please continue to discuss on list. Woo, can we take one more talk? Yeah. Short? No?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you because you're in the room.
Which talk is it?
Or it would be good to
L4S
open up the how do we proceed on the L4S ops draft in the few minutes we have remaining, even if we don't do the status review on it?
Yeah, let's skip ahead to the question and have some discussion.
Yes, please.
If the room in the next session, we can go from there.
Yeah, we'll find room to discuss properly, but let's raise it. So Greg, you have the L4S ops as the editing document. You want to cut straight to the question and give us a very quick run through in 1 minute to where we are? Are you online?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm online. Yeah, so skip forward. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. There's one to-do left in the draft, and so I'll be asking for input from the working group on how to address that open question. And the next slide is the So no updates to drafts since the last IETF. I do have a work in progress, draft 03. At this point, it only has some typo fixes, some misspellings, etc. Certainly, new contributions would be accepted if there are additional materials that need to be covered in the draft, but I've not heard any contributions or comments of that nature since the last IETF. So the original plan for this document was for it to remain a draft during the L4S experiment. And the question here is that still the desired path forward? Or should we be moving towards finishing this and publishing as an RFC? I'll leave it to comments.
All right,
Yeah,
I'll insert myself in the mic. I would suggest that it would benefit those who want to work with L4S to declare victory on this, move it forward as an RFC shortly after or with the L4S drafts, and then immediately open a BIS draft to capture things we learned during the L4S experiment. As Greg, as your slides show, the draft is pretty much stable. I don't think there's any major contributions, and I think getting it out a bit more broadly is probably a good thing for all concerned.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, Martin Duke, Google. During the L4S experiment is an interesting phrasing to me. Like how long is that?
At least one IETF cycle.
Well, that's no time in IETF time.
I would just, I have no idea, Martin, but I would suggest having a draft open to collect lessons learned as people learn them would be a good thing. And then sometime in the future, we get to have this slide on the BIS draft.
Fair enough. I mean, my question is directed more to Greg than to David's proposal. Because I mean, like, you know, in theory, the L4S experiment continues until we publish a PS, which
Indeed.
seems like too long. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess my question would be, to what extent are operators like either already running this or like poised to start like tomorrow? Like, are we expecting like very quick operational experience to emerge in like the next few months, or is it going to be years and years before we have additional learnings to improve this document?
I would anticipate it's on the order of small numbers of years before we have significant deployment and operational experience, not weeks or short numbers of months.
Okay, well then, as an individual, I would say that that answer tells me that maybe David's solution is a good one. But I know we're short on time, so I'll sit down. Thanks.
Mira's in the queue.
Yeah, just a very quick +1 to publish it right now.
Okay. I mean, the options we have in the working group to consider are whether we freeze the document and we hold it because we think we're going to immediately update it in the short number of IETF cycles, or we opt to publish. So this is what Greg's raising, and this is what we'd like feedback from. We've heard a few comments here. We will, of course, ask on the list to see if there are any further comments. But we've heard the comments. Thank you ever so much for contributing. Thank you for coming to this meeting. And we will continue on Friday with a much longer slot. And do come and join us on Friday, please. Thank you.
I was just going to go to